Welcome to Haunt Tech Tips, the source for technical advice to take your haunted attraction to the next level. Here's your host, Chris Gay.
Welcome back, everyone. This week's topic is uninterruptible power supplies and how to use them for your haunt. A UPS, or uninterruptible power supply, or battery backup, is a device that you plug into your power outlet. It acts a lot like a surge strip, however, sometimes all or sometimes part of the outlets will provide battery backup in the event of a power failure or brownout, and they also almost universally provide surge protection in the event of a power surge. For a haunt, this is critical just because we're only open so many hours. If the power goes out, and it doesn't have to be storm-related. It could be a car hits a pole down the street. It could be a branch in the wires. It could be a squirrel eats a transformer. These things happen. And when they happen, it causes an interruption in our business. Either you can't take credit cards at the box office. The show itself could be shut down just for safety reasons. If it's a quick outage, usually it can recover and the show goes on. If it's a long outage, obviously most haunts are going to have to shut down because your fire alarm system, your safety system's in place, your lighting, all of that's going to go down. You need a plan B, you need flashlights, and you need to have a plan for this just like you'd have a plan for a fire or a medical emergency. For the short outage, though, that's the huge interruption that we can avoid using these battery backups. Per se, the power flips. You're going to lose your box office's ability to print tickets, to actually do any ticketing if you use a computer system, to take credit cards, so on and so forth. All of your media players are going to go off. You might have to go turn them back on manually, you might have to reset them, you might have to hit play, so on and so forth. And any of your prop controllers or whatnot, they're going to be back to square one. A lot of them will just come right back up and keep working, but unless you've tested that, don't count on it. Several other things could possibly go down in the event of a power outage, even if it's brief or brownout. So there are a few brands of UPS out there. APC is my personal favorite. I've installed dozens of them, if not a couple hundred. Minuteman also makes them. CyberPower, TripLight, and of course there's plenty of other small name brands out there, but those are the big four at the moment. When you're looking for a UPS, you can find them in a pinch in a store like Walmart or Staples, but honestly, you're going to overpay and probably not get the best one out there. What you want to look for is the wattage of the unit. There's going to be a couple numbers on it. Wattage, which is a maximum load it can support. Voltage amps, which is a calculation. You would think it would be wattage, but it's not. Voltage amps, voltage times amps equals wattage. But not exactly. That's just an expression of the power capacity of the system. However, the wattage number is going to be lower than the voltage amp number, probably about 60% of it, and that is a safe wattage that the unit can handle. You never want to exceed the wattage because, long story short, it will either fault out and shut itself down, and you'll have to reset the internal breaker so it does nothing for you at that point. Or, best case scenario, exceeding the wattage, you're just going to have a very short battery runtime. They also usually give you an expected runtime at a certain wattage on the box. Per se, it's a 600 watt UPS. They'll probably tell you it'll run half an hour at 100 watts. And again, you don't want to max these out. I would go no more than half of the wattage unless you have to. But keep in mind, the more wattage you put on a single UPS, the shorter the runtime. There are different types of UPS. There is the professional models, which usually have automatic voltage regulation. This is the feature that will keep the power running without switching to battery mode in the event of a brownout. Or if there's a surge, obviously, it will bleed off the surge power as well. Then there's consumer models which don't have that. If there's a brownout, they just switch to battery power. If there's a surge, they will still work out the surge as best they can. And again, there is a breaker on these, so you can reset that if it overwhelms it with the surge. There are outlets on these, and there's not always all battery backup. Usually there's about 2/3 battery backup outlets, and then 1/3 of the outlets are usually surge only. So this would be your unnecessary electronics that are attached to your system, be it a printer, be it your second computer monitor, etc., etc. The reason for this is just so you can have additional electronics on your UPS that are being surge protected, but they're not going to eat at the battery if the power does go out. The batteries in these are going to typically, and this is not a perfect number, but typically last 3 to 5 years if it's plugged in and charging the battery at all times. That number can be substantially less if you have a lot of blackouts. Here at the Jersey Shore, with winter storms, the occasional derecho, and nor'easters, hurricanes, all that, we typically see 2 to 3 year life on these, maybe 4 if they're inland. However, you'll see drastically less if you're unplugging it and leaving the battery sitting without being charged year-round, except for during the haunt season. So keep that one in mind. The batteries for these can also go bad on the shelf. If it's not being charged and the battery fully discharges by just sitting on the shelf for a couple years, the battery can fail. I've seen brand new boxes. That was a hospital install, and the boxes were spare UPSs they bought, a few extras when they bought the original batch. Brand new box, cut the tape. This was 5 years after they bought it. Batteries were stone dead. The unit itself is still good, but needs new batteries. The perk, though, the batteries are replaceable, and they are a fraction of the cost of the unit. The batteries are typically going to cost you between $20 and $50. $50 is a pretty high-end unit. $20 is a more consumer model, which we'll most likely be using for haunting. And again, 3 to 5 year life typically. Most of these also have inlets and outlets on the back to protect a cable line, be it for your cable TV box, be it for a cable modem. That's where I would recommend to use it, is for cable modems. They also have phone in and out protection, so you can protect a landline phone, or if you happen to have DSL, you can protect your DSL modem. Oftentimes, not all, but most of them also have a USB outlet, so you can plug it directly into a computer and manage the computer with that. It will basically make your PC run like a laptop, so it will automatically shut itself down if the power goes too low. When you buy one of these, if you buy it new, on arrival the battery will most likely be unplugged. There's probably going to be stickers all over it warning you to open it up, plug in the battery first. Most are done that way. Some do ship with the battery plugged in. Sometimes there's a tab on the bottom you pull. Sometimes there's a key you plug into the bottom. Sometimes it's just straight up wire terminals you have to put together. There's probably going to be a spark when you connect it. These batteries do have a bit of amperage in them. Don't worry about that. Don't lick or stick. But if you're just plugging it in, not touching the metal, you'll be fine. Once it's all connected, connect it to power and boot it up. Again, the different units work different ways. Some have hard switches, some have soft electronic buttons, some even have more than one switch, a power switch on the back, power button on the front, so on and so forth. Just check your manual on it. Some of these units, usually the more professional models, even have a little LCD screen. That'll give you a load graph showing how much of the maximum load is currently occupied. Some of them will give you a voltage readout saying your incoming voltage, your outgoing voltage. Some will give you estimates on how long it will run based on the current load it has. Those are handy, but not necessary, and they do jack the price up a little bit. As long as you know the wattage of your devices, it's not necessary. Most of these have alarms, usually just a beeping alarm. You can usually set the alarm to either go off the second power's lost, to trigger once the battery reaches a low threshold, say 20-25%, or you can silence it altogether. I wouldn't recommend that because then somebody could accidentally unplug it, not realize what happens, because, they accidentally unplug a UPS with no alarm, everything's going to keep working. So I would definitely keep on at least a low voltage alarm, but usually the full alarm. These will also usually alarm when the battery is going bad after that 3 to 5 years. It'll be plugged in, you'll have power, the alarm will be going off. Don't ignore this for too long. I've seen people ignore it for quite some time, but some of these, once the battery finally does go all the way bad, will actually shut themselves off altogether. This is kind of a silly design, but at the same time I get it, so it's going to warn you for a few days, a few weeks, that the battery is going bad, and once it does, it's no longer offering any protection anyway, so it shuts down, so you fix the battery. Again, that's kind of a tricky situation, so just make sure that you keep a monitor on these, and if it's alarming, replace your battery if there's no obvious reason for the alarm. Some of these units also have master power ports. What that is, it's a labeled port on the back on battery backup that when there's an active electronic device pulling current off of that outlet, it turns on other outlets. Say you have a computer with a printer. You turn off the computer, it's going to turn off the power port for the printer. Now, that doesn't always work out. Per se, you have a Wi-Fi based printer, you turn your computer off, you still want to be able to print from your phone. You don't want that option. Most of them, if you read through the manual, there is a way to shut off that option. Not all have this, but it is an option that's out there on some. And when you do install these, they do use around 5, 10, 15, 20 watts just to charge the onboard battery at all times. So you're going to see a very, very slight bump in your power bill if you get a bunch of these. But again, keep in mind, 15 watts for peace of mind. This shouldn't break the bank by any means. Now, most of these out there in the office and business environments are connected to computers. That way you're not going to lose your work when there's a power outage or brownout. Also, it's just better for the computer, so the computer's not taking that sudden dropout when your hard drive's spinning at a couple thousand RPM, when your CD or DVD drive's going, when you're writing or reading files, etc. You're not going to go corrupt files, you're not going to drop out. But for us, there's a lot of other purposes for these. You could put a UPS on a show controller, just so you have a brief power outage, the whole show's not going to come screeching to a halt. You should definitely have one of these on your security cameras if you have them. Alarm systems, be it burg or fire. Fire alarm systems usually have a battery backup incorporated within them. Burglar alarm systems usually do, but not always, depending on the system. So, never a bad idea to back those up. I would check with your installers before doing anything with the fire alarm system backup, though. Media players are great to back up just because most of them are going to go back to a home screen or whatnot if they lose power. Don't back up your amplifiers, though. Put them on your surge-only side, but an amplifier just takes too much power, and you're going to kill a battery and a battery backup very quickly, if it'll even support it. LED lights, you can throw those on battery backups just because they use so little power, they'll keep running. If you have two-way radios for your attraction, throw a charger on a battery backup, so if you have an emergency, you have batteries on your radios that are good to go. Cordless phone is good to put on a battery backup. That way you still have the ability to reach out and call 911 per se if your power goes down and something happens. Your modem and router, definitely put these on there just so you don't have to wait for that reconnection. Now, it's possible if something took out a pole or wires and you lost power that the internet might be down as well, but not always. A lot of the time, power lines will have a short, etc., throw a breaker, and it's just a matter of waiting for the electric company, or even just quick power flashes. It doesn't take long to crash a modem that's going to take 5 or 10 minutes to reboot, and if it's on a busy night, the power flashes, you don't want to have to shut your box office down for 5 or 10 minutes. Speaking of which, cash registers and credit card machines, you definitely want these on battery backup. Even if it is just your concession booth or your souvenir area, people can complete their transactions. That way you're not just immediately shut down. Also, it's a little terrifying as a customer when the power goes down right after you swipe your card, because your customer and frankly your cashier is not going to know if that card went through or not. And if it was a big transaction, that could be a big issue. So not losing that card machine is huge. And again, you can back up a register, a credit card machine on one UPS with these. That's not going to be a whole lot of power. It's also good to have these out there if you have generators running your attraction. Just because we all know how generators work. Sometimes they run out of fuel. Sometimes you're going to have a surge when they start up. Sometimes you might even have a little bit of a brownout if generator is just missing a little bit or has an issue. This will provide some protection to your electronics and also keep you running during those quick outages, per se, if you have to refuel. Now, after a power outage, If the battery didn't totally die, they should self-restore, start recharging themselves, everything goes back to normal. If it's a prolonged outage, though, power's out overnight or a few hours, whichever, most likely you're going to have to manually turn the unit back on. Now, if the battery's still good to go, it'll recharge, it'll turn it on, it'll probably beep for a minute, then you'll be good to go. It's possible if your battery totally died, especially if it's an older battery, that it might not turn back on until you replace the battery. And this goes again with old batteries that fail on their own. These units, if they detect the battery will not charge, or the battery has failed, has a dead short, something like that, an internal failure, it's not going to throw power at a bad battery, most likely. Some units may differ, but if a UPS will not turn back on after a power outage, usually the surge-only side will still work. You just won't have battery backup, so just move things to the surge-only side and get yourself a new battery. As for where to get these units, Amazon is frankly where I usually get them. Of course, there's other sites, Newegg, eBay, things like that. You can get a lot of them used. There's a surprising amount of companies and government agencies out there that when the batteries die after 3 to 5 years, instead of replacing the batteries, they buy a whole new unit. Which, I get it, they want to have their units under warranty, but for us, you can get some really good deals. You can get big commercial pro-grade rack mount battery backups that were meant to run a whole server for cheap. Granted, you're going to have to go spend $30, $40, $50, $60 on batteries, but you just save $200 on a major unit. Well, there you go. So that's battery backups in a nutshell. There's almost countless uses for them. Everything nowadays is electronic. You can pepper these throughout your haunt. I would not recommend running extension cords to them just because you're going to have some current loss and voltage loss in the cord, so it's going to eat up more wattage than it should. In a pinch, it's possible, but I don't recommend it. I would recommend spreading these around your attraction, powering critical things, even LED lighting, safety lighting, things like that. And obviously, if the power goes out and stays out, unfortunately, you're going to have to close your attraction, escort your people out the emergency exits, and hopefully the power comes back on, you can continue your night. But at least with these, the power flashes, quick brownouts, things like that, aren't going to shut down your show. They're not going to shut down your cash registers, and they're not going to shut down your command center or your cameras, so on and so forth. So hopefully this helps keep your business uninterrupted and your power uninterrupted. For more details, check out our site, haunttechtips.com. There will be a link to a few different units that we recommend that we've used in the past. Mostly the APC units. So far, so good. I have seen some failures with other brands, but I've never seen an APC fail. So that's what I would personally recommend. Take that with a grain of salt. If you can find a good deal out there, it might be worth it.
Thanks for listening. Go to haunttechtips.com for show notes and more.